Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, and welcome to another episode of Comic Class, the show every single week on this channel where we just geek out about comic books. And today we are once again taking a look at all the ResurrXion titles that have come out from Marvel. Now, I did one of these episodes about a month and a half ago in which I talked about all the issues that had come out until then, and today Astonishing X-Men, the last new title from ResurrXion, has come out, so now we can do our final look at all these books. So I'm going to go and talk about all the books that have come out since the last episode, but I'm also going to give you an update on how I feel about each of the books that I talked about the first time. Now, we're going to start off by talking about the Inhumans books because A, let's be real, I know that the vast majority of my audience want to hear about the X-Men books, so we're just going to get this out of the way right now. But B, because, in all honesty, my feelings about the Inhuman books have not changed since the last episode, so we can get through these real quick. Royals, I still feel the exact same way. I think it's fun, I think it's got some promising moments, I think Al Ewing has a big idea for this book, but in all honesty, I don't really care for the way that he writes the characters. I think he makes them way too clever and snarky and tries to make them way too hip and cool, and that's not the way that I picture the Inhumans talking, and it just doesn't really fit to me. Secret Warriors, this book still continues to be a huge surprise hit to me, and it is largely because this ragtag band of characters who you would never picture being on the same team together have the exact chemistry that you would want from a ragtag band of characters who you would never picture being on the same team together. I love that every single issue has focused on one character specifically, so that way we can really delve inside their minds and see where they're coming from. But as I said, the thing that makes this book so incredibly good is just the character interactions. It is the chemistry between the characters on this team, because everybody is so different from each other, and Matthew Rosenberg is able to capture each of their voices and all the hilarious interactions that they would have perfectly. And if this book doesn't end up working out, which, let's be real, it's starting off as a tie-in series, and those never really last that long after the big tie-in event is over with, so there's a good chance that it won't last. But if it doesn't last, there is a moment in this series where they interact with the X-Men, and it was in that moment that made me realize, oh my gosh, Matthew Rosenberg would be the perfect guy to put on an X-Men book. So if this book does not work out, Marvel, you've got your next X-Men writer lined up right there. And lastly, Black Bolt. Now, the last time that we talked about this book, I said that its issue number 1 was one of the best issue number 1s I had read from Marvel in a long time. But we are now 3 issues in, and my opinion has not changed at all. Oh my gosh, I love Black Bolt. This series is scratching that itch I have had ever since The Vision ended. Yeah, are you one of those people out there who loved how serious and deep The Vision got with all of its topics and how it explored its characters? Read Black Bolt. And also, I said that I have not been the biggest fan of the Inhuman series recently because I don't think that the writers have been writing the Inhumans the way that I enjoy picturing the Inhumans. Like, I always think of the Inhumans being more like Game of Thrones in space, but instead they try and make them way too hip and cool. Saladin Ahmed, who is writing Black Bolt, he gets it. This feels like an Inhuman series. However, there's really only one Inhuman in here. It's Black Bolt. He is trapped in a prison in space where he cannot leave, even through death. If he dies, he just gets resurrected, and they find out that the warden is basically just drawing power from all of their death and resurrections and all the pain and torture that they're all going through. Yeah, that's exactly what an Inhuman series should be about. That is exactly the kind of foe and a situation that an Inhuman would find themselves going up against. But he isn't just writing Black Bolt incredibly well, he's writing all the characters in here very well. Like, there is a moment where he runs into the Absorbing Man, who has also been sentenced to this space prison. And I had always thought of the Absorbing Man as some one-dimensional, big, dumb, I smash things type of characters. But he's talking to the Absorbing Man, and they're trying to work together to find a way to break out of this prison. And the Absorbing Man just says, listen, you notice anything about me? I still have all my teeth. Yeah, I used to be a boxer. I've been sentenced to prison more times than I can count, and I have fought 2 different Thors, and I still have all my teeth. You know how that is? It's because I'm smart. Everybody thinks I'm dumb just because I keep getting beat up and I keep getting sent to prison. No. I keep getting beat up and sent to prison because I know when to call the fight. I know when a fight is lost. and I know there's no point in continuing a fight when a fight is lost. You see, I'm way smarter than everybody out there thinks. I know when to just sit and wait for the right time. And I was like, oh shoot, I will never look at the Absorbing Man the same way again. Like, just in one moment, this writer was able to redefine the way that I look at a character who I've been reading about for over a decade. And in the last issue, issue 3, that issue ends with them actually going up against the prison warden, and it is a stunning moment. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it is a wonderful confrontation. It's one of those moments where it's like, alright, Black Bolt is all powerful, and he still might get his ass kicked in this situation. So yeah, even though I have not talked about any of the X-Men books yet, and there are indeed many of them that I am enjoying a whole bunch, I will just go ahead and flat out say Black Bolt, out of all these books, is my number one pick. Heck, it's probably my number one pick out of any book from Marvel. I absolutely love this book, and unless starting with chapter 4, it turns in a totally different direction and they just drop the ball, you can guarantee this is going to end up somewhere in my top 100 best books of 2017 list. And if you are new to this channel, yes, every single year we do a top 100 list. It's rather long. But alright, let's move into the thing that most of you have been waiting for, the X-Men titles. Now, I'm going to run through very quickly all the books that I had previously already covered, starting with XMen Blue, because I believe last time I said that this was the book that I was enjoying the most, or at least I think it was the best out of the team books that we had gotten so far, and I'm still enjoying it. I still think it's a pretty darn good series. However, it's done something in the last couple issues that made me go, yeah, this is now becoming way more complicated than it should be. And what I'm talking about is that this book was all about the original 5 X-Men working with Magneto to find a way to return to their home dimension because they realize that their home dimension now doesn't have an X-Men team to defend it, but also at the same time Magneto is sending them out there to fight all the big threats to mutant kind in order to try and make the world safer for both humans and mutants so that they can coexist and live together. I actually really enjoy seeing that change in Magneto. It really speaks to how far his character has come and all the growth that he's gone through, so I do enjoy that. However, in the last couple issues, they introduced James Hudson Jr., aka the Wolverine from the Ultimate Universe, aka the son of the original Wolverine from the Ultimate Universe. Yeah, that sounds kind of confusing, but it made sense if you were reading the Ultimate books. However, the Ultimate books are done. It's over with. That universe doesn't exist anymore. And I was okay with that because we got Miles. Miles is in the main universe. That's fine. We don't need any of the other characters. They can all go their own separate ways. However, they have decided to keep James Hudson Jr. He is now part of this universe, and he is part of this X-Men team. And I thought, you know what? XMen Blue had a really simple concept to it. It was really easy to understand. Don't get me wrong, the whole alternate reality, original X-Men, Magneto being a hero, it's kind of complicated, but you can read this book and understand it. You start throwing in survivors from the Ultimate Universe, now it's got a whole new layer of complexity to it, and it's not just him. It's revealed that Miss Sinister, yes, there's a female version of Mr. Sinister, so again, that's another thing that might be kind of complicated to new readers, but it's revealed that she has been collecting other survivors from the Ultimate Universe, none of whom have memories of their previous world, and so now she's got an army of mutants from the Ultimate Universe here to fight these other reality-displaced X-Men. Listen, it's still pretty good. I'm still enjoying it. But I used to be able to simply sum up this book when I was trying to pitch it to people in my store. I can't really do that anymore. If you have been a fan of everything Marvel Comics related for a long time and you understand every single word that I said, this book is still good. It's still enjoyable. However, if you were one of those people out there who's like, you know what, I want to get into the X-Men books. I'm starting this new. Where should I start? I could have recommended XMen Blue as long as you were willing to sit through a brief explanation of it. I can't really recommend XMen Blue anymore, so that's my one big problem with it. It's now gotten to a level of complexity where I don't think new readers can get into it anymore. In fact, I don't even mean that as in new readers to comics. I mean as in just new readers to X-Men. But if you are not a new reader to X-Men, if you've been around for a while and you understand all this stuff, it's still pretty good, and I think that you'll enjoy it. However, if you are a new reader to the X-Men or to comics in general, we have XMen Gold, and last time that I talked about this, I applied it by saying it is an X-Men book. It is a book that you sit down, you read, and you go, yep, that's what the X-Men are. Like I said with XMen Blue, I had to explain to new readers what the deal was so that they could understand the book if they started reading it. I don't have to explain anything about XMen Gold. I can just hand it to people, they can pick it up, they're good to go. I applaud Marvel for creating a book like that. However, I said the actual quality of the writing was, it's okay. It wasn't anything great. It had good moments in there. It had the occasional good line. I enjoyed seeing these characters again. But for the most part, the writing was a little bit flat. It wasn't really that interesting. There was nothing in there that really grabbed me. There were really no memorable lines in there. There were really no big great moments I could point to and go, oh, I'm gonna remember that. However, since then they have done a new storyline that involves a brand new type of Sentinel, and I actually really dug that storyline. Don't get me wrong, the dialogue was still just kind of okay. However, the actual story itself, what the new Sentinel was doing, seeing all the heroes come together, the way that the tension slowly built up and rose to a peak, it was all handled very well. I was actually really impressed with that storyline. In fact, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone out there who hasn't already read it, but I will just go ahead and say there is a moment in which this new Sentinel is attacking locations, and everybody's wondering why on earth is it attacking these locations, and then it ends on the last page by saying why it's doing these things. I kind of gasped at it. I was actually really shocked at that moment. I actually looked at that and went, oh, that's actually a great thing to do with the next wave of Sentinels. So yeah, while XMen Blue for me went from, yes, this is great, check it out, to, it's okay, XMen Gold has gone from, it's okay, to, yeah, it's actually pretty good, go ahead and check it out. Next up is Weapon X, and the last time that I talked about this book, I said it was kind of my guilty pleasure because I could look at the book and understand why everybody was complaining about, why it was getting the worst reviews out of all these Resurrection titles, but at the same time, I was actually really enjoying it. I was actually having a really fun time with this series. I absolutely loved seeing old Man Logan basically just keep poking the bear that was Sabretooth, that these two who had been fighting for decades finally had to work together, and old Man Logan was just too old to give a crap about Sabretooth anymore, so Sabretooth couldn't really affect Wolverine anymore, but Wolverine kept poking fun at Sabretooth, and because of that, it was just kind of hilarious to see those tables turn. And yeah, that has not changed. That is still a major part of this team. In fact, it's no longer just old Man Logan doing this anymore. It's now the entire team is just like, yeah, we don't care, Sabretooth, and they just keep poking fun at him. And Sabretooth is just like, you know I could murder all of you, right? And they're like, shut up. Yeah, I can't help it. I find that hilarious. But since then, they have started their big crossover with the Totally Awesome Hulk series, and honestly, it's alright. I'm enjoying it. It's not really changing anything up, so I think that if you were having problems with this book before, you're probably still going to feel the same way. However, I come in here all the time and complain about how Marvel just keeps shoving big crossovers into everything and how that keeps negatively affecting books. But it's not really doing that in this situation. It's only one book crossing over with another book. There's actually a reason why they would cross over. The writer on both these books is exactly the same, so everybody still sounds exactly like themselves. So this is one of those times where I can point at a crossover event and go, yeah, that's okay. This is not following all the problems that other Marvel crossover events have. You don't have to pick up 20 other new books to understand everything. It's just one other book if you happen to be reading one of them already. So yeah, it's fine. I don't really think it's great, but then again, I didn't think this book was great to begin with. I just thought it was fun. I thought it was an enjoyable read to see these character interactions, and yeah, the character interactions are still there. Next up is Generation X, and I talked about issue number 1 last time that we did the show, and since then they have now gone up to issue number 4, and I'm not going to talk about issue number 4 because as much as I hate saying this, this is the first of these books that I've dropped. Yeah, it's sad whenever there's a big event and you always get to that first book that you have to drop that you can't keep following, but yeah, this is it, and it's not because the book is bad. It's just very, very okay. And sometimes very, very okay is actually worse than bad, because bad is at least memorable. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even remember what happened in issue number 3, and that's why I had to drop this book. Issue number 1, 2, I still remember, but when issue number 4 came out, I looked at it and went, oh my god, did I pick up issue 3? I did. What the heck happened in it? But as for the reasons why I think this book is just okay, I really hate saying this because to me the art should not matter for a book, it should just be the writing, but I do not think that the art is a good match on this book. The art in here, it would work great on some other series, but it just does not feel like Generation X to me. It does not feel like the young X-Men team to me. It doesn't have that life to it, that energy to it. It's got far more like maturity to it. And I'm not saying that a team full of young characters can't be mature. I'm just saying it looks like the art that you would put in a book where everybody sits around kind of discussing politics. It does not look like a book full of teenagers going to school and having big wacky adventures. But as I said, to me the most important thing about a book is the writing. And yeah, as I said, the writing is really just okay, and it has a lot to do with the fact that I just don't care about anybody on this team. I don't hate anyone on this team. Okay, I kind of hate Quentin Quire. Yeah, if Jason Aaron isn't writing him, I don't find that guy charming at all. He's the Damian Wayne of the Marvel Universe. That's right, Damian Wayne fans, I said it, come at me. But his presence on this team, it almost feels like fan service. It almost feels like they went, well, the X-Men fans like him, let's make sure that we put him in the book. But I keep looking at him on this team like, why are you even here? You graduated from this school during the Jason Aaron run, and you're still just kind of hanging around, and you're just here to be a jerk. And it feels like every single time that a writer takes on Quentin Quire, they have him grow, they have him mature, they have him reach a point where he is not the guy he used to be, he is a little bit more adult. And then the next writer comes on and he's just back to being a total jerk. And in this one, he's back to how he was during the Grant Morrison run, where it's like, yeah, he's a flat out supervillain almost. He is being a complete a-hole in those first 2 issues. And as for the rest of the characters on the team, they really feel like they're just kind of there. Like, this really feels like the Jubilee and Quentin Quire book, and the rest of the characters on this team, they do nothing that I find memorable. They do nothing that really makes me go, oh, I'm glad that they're on the team. Yeah, this is a team book, and honestly, I don't really care about this team. As I said, I never stop and look at this team and go, oh my god, that character's so annoying. I never look at this book and go, oh my god, that dialogue was so bad. No, because the dialogue is not bad. And I do not really have a problem with anybody on this team, aside from Quentin Quire. It's really just that it's kind of uninteresting. It's just very okay. And when there are so many other books out there to choose from, it's really hard for me to recommend, even to die-hard X-Men fans, to spend your money on a book that's just okay when there are so many other X-Men books out there right now that are way better, that actually are interesting. Heck, as I said, a lot of people really don't like Weapon X, but I can at least point to some things in there that I remember. I can at least point to some things in there that made me go, yeah, but that was really darn fun in there. There's nothing really in here that I can point to and say that about. Alright, now the next 2 books that I'm going to talk about are the only 2 books that are not starting over. They are continuing their old numbering, and thank goodness for that. Because, yes, there was a time in which Marvel constantly relaunching with brand new number 1s always coming out. It did work for them, but that time has passed. Now that's actually kind of a hindrance to Marvel. Now it's kind of a thing that people are getting frustrated with, so I'm really glad that even though it would have been real easy for them to relaunch all new Wolverine and old Man Logan, they decided not to do that. However, Old Man Logan did get a brand new writer, and all new Wolverine kind of got a fresh jumping on point. She got a brand new costume, and in all honesty, that's kind of the only thing that changed in there. However, that brand new costume was enough to make people look at that and go, oh, hey, a fresh starting point. I can begin reading here. And I did see a bunch of people in my store start picking up that book when they had not been reading it before that. So, hey, sometimes a simple cosmetic change like that can help. In fact, I'll go ahead and start with All New Wolverine. Now, I read the first storyline for All New Wolverine, and I really enjoyed it. But when it got to Civil War II, man, I was just so frustrated with everything in that event. I got about halfway through that tie-in, and I just went, I'm out. I think this book is really good, but I just don't want to read anything connected to Civil War II right now, and I haven't picked the book up since then, so this was a good opportunity for me to get back into this series, and I'm really glad that I did, because so far, this series has been excellent. I have really been enjoying the latest storyline, in which basically this alien child crash lands on Earth, and the alien is infected with some kind of disease. She lands on Roosevelt Island, so they have to quarantine the whole island because the disease spreads quickly. It starts going from one person to the next, and everyone on that island is slowly dying, but the alien said Laura Kinney's name. So she then goes to that island, and she discovers that when she touches someone who's infected, the disease then goes into her, but her healing factor is able to defeat the disease. So basically, the way to cure everyone on this island is she has to go up to each of them and one by one absorb the disease into herself until her healing factor can destroy it. But that's too much for one person, so she then teams up with every other mutant out there with a healing factor. She gets Daken in there, she gets Old Man Logan, she gets her little sister in there, and she gets Deadpool, of course. And I love the interactions between Deadpool and Laura's little sister. I think that's actually kind of adorable that they kind of bond over being so messed up. And there are a couple of other sweet moments between Daken and Laura and Old Man Logan. In fact, this whole story arc was just really sweet. It was basically just showing, hey man, Wolverine doesn't always have to be the person that guts someone up. It's not always about stabbing people. It is sometimes about just being a hero. Like, this really kind of reminded me of one of my favorite Doctor Who storylines, where basically the Doctor just celebrated that for once no one had to die. He was able to cure and fix and save everyone. And that's kind of what this was. It was Laura pushing herself to her limits and trying to cure everyone on this island. In fact, there's a great line in there in which Old Man Logan is about to beat up some thugs, and she just goes, nuh-uh, we're not using the claws today. And basically she just uses the healing factor to save everyone on this island. It was really darn touching. It was a great story to tell for Laura Kinney. But I know what you might be saying, yeah, but it's still Wolverine. I still kind of want to see her slashing stuff up. Well, the next storyline has begun since then, and it's her going into space to try and figure out why this alien girl knew her name and knew that she could cure this disease. So she teams up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, goes into space, and they get attacked by the Brood. Okay, even Laura Kinney is not going to feel sympathetic for the Brood. So if you are looking forward to Wolverine cutting stuff up, this next upcoming storyline is for you, and I can't wait to see what happens. Now, moving into Old Man Logan, the new writer on this book is Ed Brisson, and he wrote a book over at Image called The Violent, and it was basically just about two people with a checkered past, and one day everything in their life goes wrong. And I really dug that series, and honestly, I think that he is a perfect fit to take on Old Man Logan. And this storyline is basically the relatives of all the hillbilly Hulks that Old Man Logan killed in his timeline have now shown up in this new timeline that Old Man Logan is living in. Comics are really confusing. I'm sorry, everyone. Just stick with me on this. But basically, they have shown up in his new timeline, our timeline, and they are there because the Maestro, the evil Hulk from the future, has come back in time and picked them up, and basically he is going to build a world of Hulks, a planet of the Hulks, if you will. So they are going to now take out everybody on Earth except for them. Okay, as I said, comics are really damn confusing, so I understand if some people just heard that description and thought that's the craziest damn thing I've ever heard. It's pretty nuts. However, it's also kind of cool. Like, if you actually know everything that I just described, it's actually kind of a cool concept. And one thing that I can tell instantly from reading this series is that Marvel is not bringing back the old Wolverine anytime soon. Yeah, the one that died, the one from our timeline, he's gone for a long time, because not only is the Laura Kinney Wolverine series still selling pretty darn well, but also I was reading Old Man Logan, and starting with this writer, he's just Wolverine. Like, he is not a stranger to this reality anymore. He is living Wolverine's life. Like, there is a moment in which he stops at a diner and he can tell something's up, and he starts asking about the people that work there, and he goes, "Those people don't work today." And I was like, "You're from an alternate future. This should all be new to you. How do you know this?" Or there's a moment in which he has to call for help, and he calls up Puck, his old friend from Alpha Flight, and even though he is an alternate future Wolverine, they're still just talking like they still know each other. Like, this is not a weird conversation for them to have at all. And it just made me realize Marvel has just come in here and said, "Listen, we know that Old Man Logan is popular. We know that Laura Kinney is popular. We don't need regular Wolverine anymore. We're just going to have Old Man Logan act like regular Wolverine. That's our answer to this." So, yeah, if you are actually a fan of the old Wolverine, and you're like, "Man, when are they bringing him back?" Not anytime soon, but just read this one and imagine that he doesn't have gray hair. If you can do that, this is your regular Wolverine book. And as far as the story itself goes, so far it's pretty good. So far I'm enjoying it. However, it's not living up to how much I enjoyed The Violent. That series was just really graphic and dark and depressing, and I feel like if Ed Brisson was allowed to just go off the rails, like if they made this a Max series and they just let him do whatever he wanted in this book, I think that it could be something great, but it really feels like he's being restrained, which is odd to say because there are moments where people are just being blown away, but I would far rather see Ed Brisson write kind of a quieter Old Man Logan book. Not one where he's taking on an army of Hulks at some Department H giant military base. I would far rather see one where he's just, kind of being Old Man Logan, where he's just sitting in a bar and just thinking about all the terrible stuff that's happening in his life, or going out there and having to maybe solve some small case that the big heroes don't have time for. I think that's kind of the story that Ed Brisson is more fit to tell. Like, if after this storyline, this series became a little quieter, if it just focused on smaller stories, more character-centric stuff, I think that he would be a better fit for that. However, hey man, maybe he doesn't want to tell those stories. Maybe he wants to tell the giant army of Hulks taking over the world story, and honestly, if that's what he wants to tell, he's doing a pretty decent job with it. Now, next up, we're going to move into a couple of the new solo character books, and I'm going to start with Cable, simply because I can go through this real quickly. I like Cable. It's actually got kind of a cool concept where they actually are taking advantage of the fact that Cable is a time traveler. I've never really read that many stories where they do that. Typically, the Cable stories that I always read, he was stuck here in the present, or even if he could time travel, he just chose not to. This is one where he's actually trying to solve a case and track down somebody who is time traveling and just messing up history and going back in time and handing off high-tech weapons to criminals throughout time. It's actually kind of an awesome concept, and so far, it's pretty darn fun. But that's really all I got. I don't really have a lot of other critiques to give on this book. I think they capture Cable pretty darn well, but that's it. I don't really have any negatives to point out, but there's nothing really great that makes me point at and go, "Oh man, that was an amazing moment." It's a fun read. That's about all I got. Next up is Iceman, and I'll go ahead and say when I was a kid, I really wanted Iceman to have his own series because Iceman was one of my favorite members of the X-Men, and now he finally has his series, but it's a little bit different than what I was picturing, partly because Iceman recently in the comics has realized that he's gay, and that is a lot for him to deal with, and he hasn't really had time to deal with that in the actual X-Men books. He has not had time to actually go through what that means for him, to actually sit down and think about, or to tell the rest of his family about that. So that's what this series is. This series is meant to be not the giant Omega level mutant going out there and fighting impossible odds. No, it's meant to be a quieter book, kind of like what I was describing I want Old Man Logan to be. It is the personal journey series. Yes, in the first 2 issues, Iceman has not really faced any big threats, and that's fine, because that was not the point of those issues. The point of those issues was for Iceman to deal with his situation. It was supposed to be about his own personal struggles. And in issue 1, I actually think they did that very well. It's him having to go and visit his dad in the hospital, and his dad has always kind of hated the fact that his son was a mutant. Like, you don't have to look back that far in the comics to find examples of Iceman's dad saying, "No son of mine is going to be a mutant. I'm ashamed of you being a mutant. Get out of my house for being a mutant." It kind of was always a big part of Iceman's character, but it's not one that a lot of like casual comic book fans know about. So the fact that they actually had to deal with that in issue number 1 and deal with the fact that his parents kind of weren't comfortable with the fact that his son was a mutant made me sit here and go, oh, this writer actually knows this character. He knows his history. He knows his relationship with other characters. In fact, there's a great moment in there in which Iceman's mom asks him about his current relationships, and she actually goes, "What about that green-haired lady you had been seeing? She seemed nice." And Iceman's just like, it's complicated, because if his parents aren't going to deal with the fact that he's a mutant, they're going to have problems with him being gay too. So I'm glad that they actually kind of showed the struggle that he was going through in that moment as well. But also it made me think, man, he actually remembers that Iceman dated Polaris. This writer knows Iceman. So even though in issue number 1 he didn't battle some big threat and it was kind of just a standalone storyline, I really dug it because it was a great introduction to this character by a writer who understood this character, and it actually showed where he was in his life. It was all about the personal struggle, and I think they captured that perfectly. My problem is, issue number 2 kind of did the same thing. Issue number 2, once again, it's just a standalone issue. It's not leading into anything. It's not continuing anything. You can just pick it up and it doesn't connect to anything else. There's no big to be continued. It's not part 1 of a storyline. It's just there. And it's all about him dealing with Kitty Pryde, his ex-girlfriend, and them kind of having to talk about Kitty now understanding that her ex-boyfriend is gay. And it's like, okay, that's important. That is something that these two should discuss. However, it's another standalone issue that's just about his personal struggles. And yeah, after issue 1, you need to start fitting that stuff into bigger stories. You need to start giving us those to be continued. You need to actually start building up to something. Start raising the tension and making us go, oh, what's going to happen in the next issue? Every single issue can't be the personal struggle issue where he takes another step forward in his life and establishes some new bond with a friend or makes amends with someone else. It can't always be that, and that's my concern with this series. Issue number 1, you can get away with a one-shot storyline. People will pick that up, they'll go, okay, I know what this book is about. Great, that's exactly what you should do in an issue number 1. I'll come back and check out issue number 2. However, starting at issue number 2, that's when you have to start grabbing your audience and making them go, this is what the series is going to be, this is what we're leading towards, this is what the big threat is going to be. And yeah, there was none of that in issue number 2. So that's really my problem with the series right now. I'm afraid that's just going to continue being like a day in the life of Iceman type of comics, and that's not what this should be. Again, I'm glad that they're doing the personal struggle stories. I'm glad that they're showing his journey and him kind of finding himself. That stuff is great, but you can do that and fit it into a larger story as well. You can do that and have a supervillain in there. You can do that and have a to be continued at the end of it and leave us on some giant cliffhanger. I think that's what this book needs to be doing at this point, and with issue number 2, it wasn't doing that. So again, really enjoyed issue number 1, but issue 2 was kind of issue number 1 all over again. However, we now come to what has been hands down my favorite series from the X-Men in these Resurrection relaunches, and that is Jean Grey. I talked about issue number 1 on the last episode. I said, you know what, it's good. They really get inside her mind. They are swinging for the fences because they have this giant threat of the Phoenix coming back to Earth. However, I didn't really care for Jean Grey's dialogue. It felt too much like how an older person thinks teenagers talk. After issue number 1, that stops. After issue number 1, she starts talking like a normal person. I was totally happy about that. So good. My biggest problem with issue number 1 is out of the way. And as I said with Iceman, what a good series needs to do is after issue number 1, they really need to start focusing on where the series is going. They need to have a big storyline plan. They need to have cliffhanger endings. They need to start showing the progression of these characters as they get closer to that ending. That is exactly what Jean Grey is doing. because after issue number 1, where she finds out that the Phoenix is coming back and is coming straight for her to possess her all over again, she decides to go to everyone else who has been possessed by the Phoenix and ask them, well, how did you guys deal with it? And what I love is that they all kind of had to admit to her, yeah, we didn't deal with it. Like, she goes into the mind of Quentin Quire and Colossus and all the other people who got possessed by the Phoenix, and they all have like little houses or little settings in there that are unique to them, that speak to their personality, and everything in there is on fire as the Phoenix is just standing over them the whole time. And they're all like, yeah, it never really leaves you. It is a scar on your mind and it never goes away and it never heals. And I was like, wow, you just set the stakes for this really high. You basically had all these people who have been possessed by the Phoenix step forward and go, yeah, you can't win. They let her know that right away. It's like, if you get possessed by this, that's it for you. It's going to be with you forever. And with issue number 3, she then goes to Namor because she's like, well, Namor doesn't seem affected by this. And then she gets inside his mind and it's just Atlantis, but everyone is dead. And then the Phoenix is just standing over him as he sits on an empty throne. And I'm like, wow, that is actually a really moving piece of imagery for Namor. And then Namor's like, yeah, okay, fine. I admit it. I'm messed up too by this thing. Even I, the great Namor, could not figure out a way to deal with this. And then while she's talking to Namor, they're getting attacked by this giant sea serpent. And the sea serpent has paralyzed Namor with some toxin, and he can't move. So Jean Grey has to fight off herself, and she ends up stabbing this thing with a trident. And when Namor sees her do that, he goes, you know what? I kept saying you were weak. I kept saying that there's no way that you could stand up to this giant creature. But you proved me wrong. You actually do have a little bit of a warrior inside you. Have you ever thought about maybe just killing the Phoenix before it gets to you? And Jean thought, that's impossible. You can't kill the Phoenix. However, I've seen my only other option. My only other option is getting possessed by it and then getting brain damage for the rest of my life because of it and being haunted by it for the rest of my life. All right, screw it. If that's my only other option, I'm going to find a way to kill the Phoenix. So now, with every single issue, she's just going to a different hero and learning how to slay the Phoenix. Like, every single hero she goes to gives her a different lesson, boosts herself up in a different way. Like in issue number 4, she goes and sees the unworthy Thor, and he basically just teaches her, yeah, listen, you gotta have confidence. He just keeps telling her all these stories of other times that he was up against impossible odds while she's trying to fight off this army of orcs. And then eventually, she just gets so frustrated with it, she's able to form a giant Thor hammer with her psychic powers. And she goes, oh my goodness, I didn't even know I could do that. And Thor's just like, that's what I was trying to teach you. Gotta build that confidence up inside you. So it's like, I love this idea. That every single issue is going to show her progressing a little bit more. Is going to take her one step closer to that endpoint. We all know she's going to have to face the Phoenix. So every single issue from here on out is another step in that hero's journey as she has to learn a different technique, as she has to boost her power in a different way. That is a great idea for this book. It is a great way to set up a storyline for this series because, like I said, you've given us the endpoint. I know where this is going, and I can watch that progress with every single issue. So yeah, not only does this book have a great idea behind it, not only do I really enjoy the way that they are writing Jean Grey, especially after issue number 1, but also it is just a clean book. It has got a clear-cut path to an endpoint, and you are watching it happen. It's been a long time since I've been able to say that about a book. So yeah, Jean Grey, my absolute favorite X-Men book out there right now. But that brings me to the final book, Astonishing X-Men. It just came out today. A lot of people have been waiting for this because they saw who the artist on this book would be. It's Jim Chung, one of the biggest artists in the industry. He typically only does covers, so it's very rare for him to do an entire issue. And also, the team just looks nuts. Like, I know so many people who looked at this team and said, that should just be X-Force. Why is this an X-Men team? Because you've got old Man Logan in there, but then you've also got like Phantom X, you've got Archangel, you've got Mystique, you've got Psylocke. Yeah, a lot of people thought this really was just going to be the next X-Force book, but no, it is Astonishing X-Men. And I'll go ahead and say, I know a lot of people have been hyping this up in their minds. Heck, I even sound like I'm hyping it up just with the way that I'm talking about it. It's pretty good. Yeah. As you can probably tell from this episode, I really hate books that are just kind of good or just kind of okay or pretty good, because it's really hard for me to really point at anything and get excited about talking about, or there's nothing for me to rant about. It's kind of just like, alright, it exists. It's fine. It's sad that this was the book that so many people were looking forward to. And again, this is just issue number 1, but after issue number 1, I think that out of the 3 X-Men books, it's kind of coming in 3rd place. But then again, I think the other 2 X-Men books are pretty darn good. So it's not really like I'm saying the book is bad. I'm just saying, yeah, the art looks great, but that's really the biggest thing that I can say about this. Basically, what happens in this issue is that the Shadow King is trying to steal the minds of all the psychics on Earth. So one by one, he's killing off all these psychics, and he reaches Psylocke, and Psylocke reaches out for help to everyone as she's being attacked, and she just randomly picks a bunch of different X-Men. Like, she picks Gambit, she picks Rogue, she picks Old Man Logan, she picks Bishop, she picks Angel, basically everyone that you can see there on the cover, except there's no Mystique in here. But Beast shows up, and Beast is the only one who we don't see him being contact. He just kind of shows up. Yeah, am I the only person who thinks that's Mystique? It's just me. Yeah, they really should not have revealed her on the cover. I'm 90% convinced I know the big twist that's going to come in this book. But in the issue, Psylocke is basically just going nuts. Her powers are flaring up. She's actually forming into a giant butterfly that climbs the building, which I actually thought was pretty darn cool. It actually reminded me of Mothra, so that was interesting. But all these X-Men come together, and they're trying to figure out a way to save her. Like, you've got all the big guns like Rogue and Bishop going up there and trying to steal her energy, while you got Old Man Logan and Gambit down there on the street trying to rescue people. I actually thought that they paced out where everybody should be during this big battle pretty darn well. They actually did think about where each of their powers worked best, so that was pretty cool to see. And then in the end, they end up going into Psylocke's mind to try and fight the Shadow King, and of course there is a big reveal on the last page, but I don't know what that big reveal could potentially mean, so I'm not going to go ahead and start theorizing it or spoil it for anybody out there who really does not want it spoiled for them. If you are mad at me for not spoiling it, just go in your local comic store and turn to the last page. There, done. But yeah, I think that this issue is pretty okay. As I said, there's nothing in here really great that I can point at. I think one of the reasons for that is because Charles Soule, who is writing this, he's got a great sense of humor, and he's trying to be really serious in this book. And it just comes off kind of flat. Like, pretty much all the dialogue and all the narration, it really just kind of feels meh. To me, there's really no kick to it, really no spark of creativity in there, except for Phantom X. Phantom X is a lot of fun because, as I said, Charles Soule has a great sense of humor, and Phantom X is really the only character in here who gets to show that off. So yeah, I really wish that he would realize I'm writing a book with a bunch of big crazy characters in here who normally probably wouldn't even be interacting on the same team together. So let's have fun with that. Let's just play up how crazy these characters can be when they actually interact with one another. Kind of like what I was saying Matthew Rosenberg was doing on his Secret Warriors book. But we don't really have that in this series. Like, it really does need that extra kick of energy, that extra kick of personality, and I feel like he's just trying to be way too serious in here. I feel like he just needs to have way more fun with these characters. But that's it, everyone. That is our look at all the Resurrection titles. Thank you for sticking with me throughout this entire episode. I know it was a long one, but then again, whenever I talk about these big relaunches, it's always going to be a long episode. So I thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what books you're enjoying down in the comments below, or on Twitter and Tumblr and Twitch at Professor Thorgy. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. We do comic book videos like this every single Wednesday, and then we do other geeky stuff on the weekends, like movie reviews or video game shows. So if you want to see any of that stuff, make sure you click that subscribe button and come back next time. Thanks, everyone.